Welcome to Small Talk by Sfarim Chatter. I'm Nachi Weinstein. In this episode of Small Talk, I'm going to be joined by Rabbi Joey Rosenfeld, who is a therapist well known for his teachings of Pnimis HaTorah, and we'll be discussing the English translation edition of the book Introduction to the Zohar, The Wisdom of Truth, Rabbi Yehuda Leib Ashlag, the Baal HaSulam. This was translated and published by Maggid Books, Koren Publishers. Small volume, about 150 pages, selections of the introduction to the Zohar of the Sulam. So thank you, Rabbi Joey, for joining me.
My pleasure. It's a schus to be here, Nachi.
What can you tell the listeners about this book and the Sulam, the Baal HaSulam in general?
So the Baal HaSulam is one of the most enigmatic and interesting personalities in the history of modern Kabbalah scholarship, meaning post the Arizal, to the degree that he was the one who had the most diverse reaction. The Baal HaSulam came and he began to reinterpret the system of the Arizal. He had found that when he arrived in Yerushalayim after leaving Warsaw, that most people who were self-proclaimed Kabbalists, whether it be from the Sephardic or Ashkenazic circles, were lacking a comprehension in the depth of the material. Meaning to say they were proficient in their capacity to describe the dynamics of, mystical metaphysics, but devoid of the inner philosophical kernel that was meant to transform human experience. And the Baal HaSulam felt, very interestingly and in many autobiographical ways, he felt that his soul came down in this particular point in history to revitalize the study of the Kabbalah of the Arizal. Now, Yonatan Meir, very interestingly, writes that what was going on really was that Hasidus had lost its kind of way because the nepotism had created rebbes everywhere. And in Warsaw, so there was no longer any way of validating or clarifying who was who and who to go to, right? You go anywhere for Kugel. And so it was the Porus of a Rebbe, who was the Rebbe of the Baal HaSulam, who decided that in order to reestablish the clear and purified roots of Hasidus, they had to return to Lurianic Kabbalah. And so they started schools, Batei Midrashim, to return back to the text of the Arizal, something that really shifted after Rav Simcha Bunim of Pshischa. And the Baal HaSulam ultimately went to set up yeshivas for this specific purpose, for the expansion of the study of Lurianic Kabbalah, and that's where he kind of developed into his own identity. So the Baal HaSulam is actually a transitionary figure who's bridging the world of the Baal Shem Tov and bringing it back to the Kabbalah of the Arizal. In order to do this, he needed to develop somewhat of a new language, right? And herein lies the first ripple in the reaction to the Baal HaSulam scholarship. He began to speak in a language that was not familiar to Kabbalists prior, and that caused a reaction, because they felt that there's something new here. And so the Baal HaSulam was a Kadosh V'Norah, he was a tzaddik, but ultimately we do see that students and the students of students did deviate from the course in a significant way. And while we don't judge a source for the symptoms that emerge, we always have to analyze the source to try and figure out where those symptoms do emerge from. So there's still a lot of work to do in clarifying what exactly the Baal HaSulam was saying and how to rectify the proper understanding of the Baal HaSulam, which is why I think this book is so important right now. Because most of Americans, English-speaking world, are only familiar with the apocryphal teachings of the Kabbalah Center, this, that, or the other thing, and they assume that Ashlag, Sulam is strange, something about socialism, communism maybe, but they don't know much, and this is an attempt to re-educate.
And the Sulam his life was 1885 to 1954. Now, what do you mean, if you want to just clarify a little bit? You said that he was speaking in a different, newer language.
So the Arizal system is, when taken at first glance, can come off as clunky metaphysics, right? And this was an issue that was addressed by Mikubalim prior as well. The Leshem Shabbat V'Chaloma spent an immense amount of time clarifying exactly the nature of the metaphor and what is literal and what is metaphoric in the study of Kabbalah, and going to town against those who were studying too much of the attempt to demetaphorize Kabbalah. And so there's always a grappling with what the nature of the metaphor or the literal kind of categories are in the Arizal. But the Baal HaSulam saw that it was really an Eis Lasos LaHashem Heferus Orasecha. Kabbalah was was kind of belittled. It was seen as superstitious. Very similar reaction formation to what Sholem Lahavdil experienced when he came to Yerushalayim. That he saw people like laughing at these texts. And the fact that there was no one taking it seriously kind of led to his interest in rehabilitating the text. So the Baal HaSulam created a more modern language that was focused far more on the dynamics of selfhood and interpersonal relationship, as well as kind of gradations of self-awareness and self-nullification, which became much more relevant to kind of the newer generation. And in the world of Kabbalah, in the world of Pnimiyas HaTorah, which is profoundly guarded in terms of its traditional way of being given over, the secrecy, the fraternity of secrecy is what upholds the secret nature of Kabbalah. So now to see a sudden shift was looked at askance, so to say.
Okay, so let's turn a little bit more to the book. And I don't know how much of an overview you want to give, especially on a small talk, an overview of like Kabbalistic terms of Esopheres and so on and so forth, or we could just talk about an overview of the Zohar through the Baal HaSulam's lens, through this Hakdama that he approaches various overarching questions and comments as it relates to the Zohar.
So we'll start, I'll try and answer both. The Baal HaSulam, very interestingly, and in letters to his individual students, he took himself very seriously, like tzaddikim usually do. And he writes in multiple places, he says, the reason my soul was given permission to come down now is because Hitler's in the generation. It was the language that he used, very severe language describing that the reaction of the need to redevelop a robust approach to Pnimiyas HaTorah is always in reaction to crisis. Always in reaction to crisis, right? This was Sholem Lahavdil's original idea, and this is supported by Tzadikim and Mekubalim as well. That it was Gerish Svard that ultimately gave shape to Kabbalah Sa'arizal, which transforms trauma and catastrophe into the emergence of building and development. And so the Baal HaSulam came, A, at a crisis of modernity, and B, in a crisis of history, and he felt that he was singularly tasked with the need to bring out the light of the Arizal kind of in a finalized way. And so the need to do things differently was rooted in his belief that Eis Lasos LaHashem Heferus Orasecha, that Pnimiyas HaTorah needed to spread forth, very much in the spirit of the Baal Shem Tov, very much in the spirit of even Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, where when we look at the Idra Rabbah and Lag BaOmer, all of it is about how long is the world going to titter upon one pillar? How long is chaos going to reign? How long is the debt collector going to be knocking at the door? Those threshers of the field are few in number, and it's up to us to take responsibility. And Eis Lasos LaHashem Heferus Orasecha. And he says, now it's time to reveal secrets. You see this in the Leshem, you see this throughout all of the Mikubalim. The only thing that compelled them towards disclosure was the necessity of the information being received. So the Baal HaSulam felt that he had full permission. And so he had a spiritual confidence to him, and he didn't care. And when he went, and the first place that he wanted to go to was the Zohar, right? Kabbalah takes shape in two stages. We have the Zohar HaKadosh, everything that is rooted in the Zohar, which includes Rav Moshe Cordovaro and all of the earlier Mikubalim. And then you have Luriana Kabbalah, the Arizal. So you have pre the Arizal and post the Arizal, ultimately, when it comes to studying the teachings of Kabbalah. And the Baal HaSulam wanted to address both. He wanted to reopen the world of the Zohar, because by reopening the Zohar, what we give ourselves is the basis for understanding the Kabbalah of the Arizal. Right? Something that happens is if you sever Kabbalah Arizal from the mystery and the poetics of the Zohar, what you have is what the Baal HaSulam's critique was. You can have mathematicians and scientists who can basically regurgitate the entire structure of Eitz Chaim with beautiful charts, but there's no inner quality. There was no inner quality. So he was seeking to retrieve the inner quality, and that enabled him to kind of see beyond whatever the text had said beforehand and be confident in his messaging. And so this was a rehabilitative task. And this book, the Hakdama L'Sefer HaZohar, is really where the Baal HaSulam doesn't even go into the Sfiros or the Partsufim or the configurations or some of the more difficult terms that need to be abstracted and personalized in order to mean something. The Baal HaSulam here was engarbing himself in a language of philosophical speculation. Right? The Baal HaSulam was educated. He was an open-minded individual. He had his own political opinions. He had his own orientation, and he didn't care about really what anybody else was saying because of this God-given, this God-driven mission. And so the questions that the Baal HaSulam addresses here are, what is this place? Why are we in this world? What is the nature of a creator? Why do we come upon the axiom of wanting to believe in a creator? Why does it seem that this world is the actual opposite of goodness? Why is there suffering? Why is there struggle? Why are human beings so unethical and immoral? Meaning he was open-minded enough to see that the world was operating in a state of decay. And instead of losing hope in that, he uses those questions as a starting point to bring us into why Kabbalah is relevant. And he shows one by one how Kabbalah begins to answer all of these questions: the origin, the process, and the ultimate telos of reality. And so in this book, the Baal HaSulam is not getting stuck in the language of the Arizal, which he does. He has an encyclopedia on the Arizal. Talmud Eser Sfiros, he has an encyclopedia on the Zohar. But in this introduction, he's really giving us a taste of why this is necessary. Why should a person care about what Chachmas HaEmes has to say? And that's what this Hakdam is about. It's about whetting the appetite to show the urgency necessary for entering into Pardes, to Pnimius HaTorah, in one way or the other. And he wasn't bothered. He felt that the spiritual task, the spiritual urgency of beginning to enter into the world of Kabbalah trumped any of the other considerations of unworthiness, Shabtai Tzvi, and the aftermath, all of the prohibitions and the political dynamics of secrecy that were set up around Kabbalah. He felt that it was an Esla Sos Lashem Mefiru Sarasecha. There's no need to be worried about these things. And when asked about kind of textual issues or the classical issues of the textual matters that he was studying, he had these amazing ways of just kind of ignoring it. I want to read, just like, let's take one when we talk about the Zohar, right? Something that obviously comes to mind is going to be the question of what's considered the authorship of the Zohar. Now, before we go to the Baal HaSulam's approach, it's important for us to know that what many people think is the orthodox perspective of the Zohar HaKadosh is very far from the orthodox perspective of the Zohar HaKadosh. Nobody will come and claim that the entire body of what we refer to as the literature of the Zohar HaKadosh is written entirely by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. That there are subsections of the Zohar HaKadosh. There's the Guf HaZohar, which is what we understand as the Zohar ala Parsha, which is a later invention of a combination of texts. We have the Raya Mehemna section of the Zohar, which is the voice of Moshe Rabbeinu. Nobody's claiming that that's Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. We have Tikunei Zohar, which is, some people will say it's directly from Rashbi, some will say it's in the spirit of Rashbi. There's the Idra Rabbah, Idra Zuta, Safra Ditzniusa, Idra de Mishkana, all of these different nodal points of the Zohar. And so, unlike other academic realms where you start off with murkiness and lack of clarity, and then you come to a place of certainty, lucky for us, when there began to be a question of Zohar scholarship, so to speak, the immediate assumption of the scholars of the time was there's no way this is from Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Right? They had their opinions, but they felt that it's impossible to claim that this is from Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and they started off with the absolute certainty that the Zohar is not from Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Where the academic realm of Zoharic scholarship has gone, especially in Eretz Yisrael, once Sholem was responded to by Moshe Idel, and Moshe Idel then had his students, ultimately, and then you have Daniel Abrams and all of the Nus and Libis, all of the studies of the Zohar, you come to find that even the greatest scholars who don't take the Zohar as a religious text necessarily, they don't believe in the divine kind of orientation of the Zohar, at this point, their question is, we're not even sure if this is a book anymore. We don't even know what book are you talking about, right? Nobody wrote this thing. It's a universe. It's a textual reality. It's a vibe, so to speak, right? Even Libis was famous as saying, like, whether it was Rashbi or not, it's most certainly the light of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And so we tend to find in different tzaddikim, the Radziner, Rav Yitzchak Isaac Chaver, and in different stages, Rav Mendel Kasher, and a lot of attempts, whether valid or not valid, to kind of address some of the scholarship issues. I have not found one that I love as much as the Baal HaSulam. Hillel Zeitlin, Hashem Yimkom Domo, is also someone who's standalone in his kind of understanding. But just listen to the language of the Baal HaSulam. This is in the Hakdama l'Sefer Zohar. It's not in this copy of the book yet, but he says as follows: with regards to the scholarship of the Zohar and the attempt to discover who wrote it, anybody who spends time in the Zohar HaKadosh understands what's written in it. Everybody has agreed that the book of the Zohar, the arrangement of the book of the Zohar is rooted in the light of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, except for those who are far from this wisdom. And there are some who begin to question the association between Rabbi Shimon and the Zohar. And they bend themselves to say, based on a number of tales or small accounts, that the author was the Makubal of Moshe de Leon, or others who were around that time. And he says, me, when I'm on my own, since Hashem has merited me to contemplate a little bit of the book of the Zohar, it's never occurred to me to spend any time whatsoever examining or trying to search out who the author was or where it came from. And it's for a very simple reason. Because the content of the book has revealed to me the greatness of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. The content of the book proves the greatness of the author. And it's the content of this book that proves Rashbi's koach greater than nearly any of the other Tanaim. And so it's the book that's doing the speaking here. It's not the name Rashbi that's doing the argument. It's the book that testifies to itself. And if it was clarified to me beyond any reasonable doubt that the author was somebody else other than Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, like Moshe de Leon, for example, so then it would just be that Rav Moshe de Leon is greater than all of the Tanaim, and even Rashbi. And he says, because in truth, from the perspective of the depth of the wisdom in this book, if it were up to me, I would assume that it was written by one of the 48 Nevi'im. And he says, really, I wouldn't be satisfied until I came to the clarified space that I knew that Moshe Rabbeinu himself wrote it. So what the Baal HaSulam is saying here is something very subtle, and I think it's very important. I think it's like a very healthy approach to the Zohar. It doesn't matter where it comes from. The Zohar speaks for itself. The Leshem Shebach Lom has a similar language. He said, ha'emes eid la'atzmo when it comes to the Zohar. And so the Baal HaSulam wasn't bothered by kind of these historical questions. He was willing to choose a path of faith that was beyond rationality. And I think this is one of the most important things that the book will teach us, and this is where its therapeutic intention is at. It's a rational approach to irrationality. It's a very systematic, philosophically direct way of coming to a place of realizing that in the end of the day, Pnimiyas HaTorah teaches us that we have to throw away our intellect and choose faith.
I also want to mention the table of contents in the book, and the book has Hebrew and English. Each page is a Hebrew page and an English page. So you get both the Hebrew and the English text. And you have the first part of the book is the desire to receive, the purpose of creation, renewed creation, the souls, part of God above, the reason the system of impurity and the husks come into being, so the klipas. Part 2 is the repaired desire to receive, the 3 states of the soul, free will, the true body, eternal creatures, suffering, our essence, resurrection of the dead, our purpose. Part 3, the worlds and man, the goal of the worlds, man's need for the worlds at the levels of
Naran Chai.
Naran Chai, they wrote it with the H.
The five layers of the soul.
Part 4, the internal and secret aspects of Torah, the reason for the drought and darkness in our generation, the solution to the darkness, the author of the desire, which is mentioned, the revelation in recent generations, internal and external, and then, quote, by studying this work, they will exit the exile with mercy, end quote. So this is the, you can really see the English translation of the Hebrew. So that's around this small volume and what it includes. You can get the sense of what's really in here. So I would just really conclude, Joey, by asking you, is that who is this book meant for?
My humble opinion is that, I think that it's clear beyond reasonable doubt that Pnimiyas HaTorah, Kabbalah, when seen through the lens of the Baal Shem Tov and his students, the Rashash and his students, the Gra and his students, the Ramchal and his students, has become fundamentally significant in the consciousness of the Jewish people at this point, more so than ever before. The ideas are more publicized, the ideas are more accessible, and the ideas are presented in clarified ways that have never been before, right? The most complex texts, the Gra's commentary on Safra Ditzniusa, within the last 2 years, 3 years, I think there's been at least 20 volumes of commentary on this. Tikkunei Zohar from the Gra, Arizal, Ozvader is coming out, meaning the matters are revealed in such a way that no one can claim it's too deep to access anymore. And so the Baal HaSulam is a really important figure that has not been appreciated enough because of the stigmatization surrounding his legacy. And this is really an attempt to expose any English reader interested in Pnimiyas HaTorah, Kabbalah, Baal Shem Tov, Gra, to expose themselves to a thinker who has so much to offer in terms of real psychological encounter with these texts. To end, there's one anecdote, a real anecdote, that when it comes to the Baal HaSulam, so it's not even clear where he's drawing from, in which world he operates, whether he's in the world of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh or whether he's in the world of the Vilna Gaon. And the way that things are typically described, that when it comes to Darche Avoda, the way in which a human being has to function in this world, he's like the Baal Shem Tov's path. But with regards to textual severity of studying Kabbalistic texts, it's like the Vilna Gaon. And so I heard Rav Itchemeyer Morgenstern Shlita says that there's a student of Rav Baruch Halevi Ashlag, who was the son of the Baal HaSulam, who says that really the Baal HaSulam came into the world to complete the job of the Baal HaTanya. If you read the Baal HaTanya's son explanation of how he would teach Zohar on Friday nights, so he would go and learn it be'iyun and uncover the roots of Luriana Kabbalah in it. So from there we see that the Baal HaSulam is a direct hamshacha of the Baal Shem Tov. Here in Beit Shemesh, there's a shul called Eish Kodesh, which is run by the Piazetzner Rebbe. Piazetzner Rebbe is the grandson of the Admor HaChalutz. So the brother of the Piazetzner Rebbe, and this is his grandson, a remarkable person. And he told me that his grandfather asked Rav Kook, what was it about the Baal HaSulam? Where does he come from? And Rav Kook answered very clearly that he's a direct continuity of the Vilna Gaon in his understandings of Kabbalah. So if you have someone who's being said to be a direct continuity of the Baal HaTanya, and someone who's being said to be a direct continuity of the Vilna Gaon, so then it behooves us to try and kind of pay attention to the message that such a synthesis-oriented thinker can offer.
Okay, I will link to the book in the show notes. It's available in Svarim stores. It's available on Amazon. It's available on Koran's website. And so you can find the link to that in the show notes. And thank you, Rabbi Joey, for joining me. And it's good we finally got down to doing a podcast.
Yes, okay. Be'ez Hashem. Yasher koach nachi.
Be'ez Hashem. Okay, thank you.